Jeff Paterson is the host of RInkWide Vancouver, our Canucks reporter. He joins us now. What did you make of the game last night?
Yeah, I joked on RInkWide that I got a little whiplash covering this hockey club right now. Like, it's just, it is hard to figure out. But I expected a bounce back. They couldn't have been any worse than they were against Boston, and I just kind of thought professional pride would kick in, and it certainly did. And I thought you saw that in the first couple of shifts with JT driving wide on Nathan MacKinnon and cutting hard to the net, and then Petey had the chance in the slot, and then he hit the post. And so, emotional investment or engagement, that was one of the buzzwords coming out of the Boston game. I think you saw it from the top of the lineup, and then ultimately it was lower in the lineup that carried the day. But look, the Florida win, you just wish that Boston game didn't happen at all. Like, can we just scrub that and just say that, hey, they strung two really solid efforts together here? Imagine if they had done that. But still haven't won consecutive games on home ice this season. So that is a modest goal. They'll get another chance on Saturday when they come back off the road here. But one step forward, one step back. But this felt like another step in the right direction. Everybody pulling on the rope in the right, together, team unity, whatever. It was a solid effort against a good Colorado team. And anytime you keep Nate off the score sheet, you've done some good things defensively.
Kiefer Sherwood, he is tied for second on the club with 11 goals. Jeff, how is he doing this?
Well, first, and credit to the crowd, and we've talked about crowds and responses, and they haven't had much to get excited about, but man, like, this team has so many chantable names, doesn't it? From JT Miller to Connor Garland to Kiefer Sherwood, just the Thatcher Demko, the syllables just work perfectly. And so last night it was Kiefer Sherwood's turn in the spotlight, and he didn't disappoint. Like, the shorthanded goal, not only a huge turning point of the hockey game, but the wheels, the finish there, the conviction and the confidence to snap one home. That was big-time stuff. So career high already, 30 games into the season. He's been terrific since day one. Like, he's given them everything they thought he would on the physical side and the spark plug and the energy, and then has backed it up with this goal scoring now, 11 on the season at the 30-game mark, which is incredible. Also, the fact that he and Pius Suter lead this team in even strength scoring. That, there's been struggles here for others. Jake DeBrusk obviously has come alive, but a lot of his success on the power play. At the 30-game mark, it just didn't see that Pius Suter and Kiefer Sherwood would be the goal-scoring leaders 5-on-5 for this hockey club, but good on them. I will say this is what I really like about Kiefer Sherwood. When you think about the struggles of proven goal scorers in this lineup, Nils Höglander, 25 now without a goal. We've talked about Dakota Joshua. Just doesn't look like the same guy, obviously, that played last year, scored 18 and earned the contract. It's been a struggle for Danton Heinen, but even DeBrusk, 9 right off the hop without scoring a goal. Kiefer Sherwood hasn't gone more than 5 games without scoring. So there has been this incredible consistency. The consistency's been there in terms of being physical and bringing the hits and all of that. But a consistency in goal scoring, and to get that lower in your lineup, that's a pretty rare commodity.
Is there just a finite number of even strength goals to come from the non-superstars? Like, is that it? Those two guys, Suter and Sherwood, have just taken up all of the air there. And, there's only one puck out there, Jeff. Is that just it?
Yeah, like, I've seen people say, hey, 11 goals in 30 games, this guy's on a 30-goal pace. I'm not penciling in Kiefer Sherwood for 30. He will have a stretch where he goes more than 5 without scoring a goal. That's just the way it works in the National Hockey League. But in terms of settling into a new team, feeling confident, letting your teammates know and your coaching staff know that there's more to your game than just being a guy that runs around and finishes hits, this has been a terrific introduction to the Vancouver market, and the fans obviously have responded here. But yeah, you do wonder a little bit. With Suter, seems to be a little more pop on his shot this year. I think his shot selection, and he's shown some finish. We've talked about he's such a smart player, puts himself in the right spots, and the pucks are finding him. But I think he, too, at some point will probably have a stretch where everything doesn't bounce his way. So they're making the most of their opportunity. And look, this has been terrific to get the contributions from guys like Sherwood and Suter when we talk about the struggles of some of those others. Like, I know there's a lot of talk in hockey circles about Nashville. What were you thinking? Letting Kiefer Sherwood walk. And sure, I mean, it doesn't look good on the Nashville Predators with the season that they're having. But really, if you think about it, the Predators didn't want to overspend on depth players. And I think that's prudent business in today's National Hockey League. They couldn't have seen this coming. So we'll give the Canucks pro scouting credit. They liked the abrasiveness that Sherwood played with in the playoffs. They hoped that there was some upside. They saw the numbers in the American Hockey League. But the Nashville Predators, they felt like, look, the Predators were punted from the playoffs because they lost 1-0 on home ice to the Canucks, right? They felt we need to go get some game breakers here. That's where they elected to spend their money. There is an irony now that the guy that walks with 11 goals here in Vancouver. But some of the thinking in Nashville, I don't think necessarily was flawed. But it is funny that here's Sherwood with 11, and yet Höglander sitting on 2. And it's been a struggle for Dakota Joshua getting back in the lineup. And Danton Heinen has shown a little bit of life here in the last couple of games, but he's gone long stretches as well. So don't lose sight of the fact that while Sherwood is doing all of this at an attractive price and is locked up for next year as well, there are some underperformers still, woeful underperformers, in fact, on this Vancouver Canuck roster.
He's got 3 more goals than Stamkos. It should also.
Yes, and more than Marchessault as well. Great first period for the 2 superstars forwards in Miller and Pettersson. 3 games without a point for Pettersson, but he was very good. And I can't imagine what the building looks like if Miller scores 8 seconds into the game. Like, after the week that we've seen here in terms of the stories and narratives, it was an interesting game, and the power play, the story got furthered last night, didn't it?
Well, guys, 30 games. I love my nice round numbers. It's always just an easy sort of jumping on point to step back and assess. The record is remarkable given the evidence that's been provided on a nightly basis. 16-9-5, still in single digits in outright losses when you think of all the drama, all the missing parts, the adversity. And yet we have watched, and we touched on earlier, just the inconsistency from period to period within games, from games to game here, and the fact that, Elias Pettersson has 1 goal in his last 9 games. So where a couple of weeks ago, he was back, they need more from him, without a doubt. But he dug in last night and had 4 shots on 8 attempts and hit a post, and there were some good things there. But, JT's last 2 goals have both been empty netters, and I know he was away for 10 games. But I come back to this, how does it all add up to 16-9-5? There are a lot of days that I have trouble wrapping my head around it, but the record is what the record is. I broke it down on Twitter in 10-game segments, 13, 12, and 12 points, remarkably consistent in terms of what those 10-game segments have yielded. And I guess you come back to this idea that, if Elias Pettersson can ramp it up again, and if JT Miller can get back to his good stuff after stepping away, and then some of those other guys, and that's the potential that everybody sees in this hockey club. And now Thatcher Demko to deliver his best performance of the 3 since he has been back. You can see it. And I felt last night was really important for the Canucks because of what lies ahead here with back-to-backs and a quick turnaround in travel. Utah hasn't played since Saturday. Vegas hasn't played since Sunday. So those 2 teams just lying in wait for the Canucks, who had to face the Avalanche and then get on their team jet here. Those aren't going to be easy games for the Canucks, and certainly the game in Vegas won't. And so rather than following up the Boston game with another subpar performance and thinking, oh man, we got to get back on the road and get this thing turned around, I think this can just allow the entire group to exhale a little bit with the amount of heat that's been on the hockey club here, and we'll see if they can put their best foot forward and take another step in the right direction against the Utah Hockey Club on Wednesday night.
I'm going to let the Pettersson griping pass because, as I said in the opening block, play that game, points will come. I thought Elias was very good last night, and that's an example of a game where if you just look at the box score, it doesn't come close to tell the story about how good Elias was. Demko was sensational last night, Jeff. Demko looked like Vezina candidate Thatcher Demko. He was really on the puck in what was a number of good sneaky chances for Colorado.
Yeah, and I think he kind of warned us, said he wasn't going to beat himself up over the first couple, and the St. Louis game, he was forced to make some incredible stops and kept them in it and got them to overtime. The Boston game, there were a couple there that I think when he's on form that he probably stops most nights, and so you can understand timing and just trying to get the feel of the game and everything back under his feet. But I agree. Last night looked a little different than the first 2. He looked big in net. Obviously, he's a big man. But he looked like he was on his game. And there were opportunities. And we're talking about the leading scorer in the National Hockey League. Nate's going to get his looks, and he did. But Demko was there to make saves on him and others. And the penalty kill, and Demko was quick post-game to point out, like the job of the guys in front. Obviously, the goaltender has to be the last line of defense on the penalty kill. This is Colorado. They can run out an incredible top end on the power play, even though they've been struggling recently for whatever reasons with the man advantage. The Canucks held them to 4 shots on goal in 8 minutes of power play time. So credit to the skaters in front of Thatcher Demko there. He had to make a couple of saves. And remember, too, like it's a 1-0 game deep into the second period. Like it's on a razor's edge there. And so he had to be sharp. And ultimately, where it came into the night thinking it might be a Makar versus Hughes sort of matchup, it turned into more of a goaltending battle. And both goaltenders were good, but in the end, the guy at the other end blinked, and Thatcher Demko really didn't until the final minute. And a shutout would have been great, but way more important for him to get a victory and deliver a performance like that. The shutout, that would have been a cherry on top 3 games back, given all that he's been through here. But I think this is really something for him to build on. And if he can deliver at this level now, my goodness, that really does give the Canucks an edge in goal almost every night out.
It was a home game, so they got to control a bit of the matchups there. But what'd you make of the final defensive pairing there? Low ice time for Brannstrom, although I didn't really see anything too concerning from him. And Desharnais was used regularly, and people liked the fact that they did not notice Desharnais. They consider that victory. How about you?
Yeah, a fascinating study, guys, in roster composition on both sides. Like it's cap world. Every team has flaws. You fill out your roster around the fringes. But then a Kiefer Sherwood's able to be the difference maker. It is stunning and stark just how little depth there is on the Colorado Avalanche, and you're reminded of that. And so, right, like JT and his line play McKinnon straight up, essentially. And I thought Pettersson took advantage of the Casey Middlestat matchup there and had his looks, and then the Canucks were able to chip away even further down the depth chart. But after Cale, Makar, and Devon Toews, it gets pretty thin pretty quickly on the back end for the Colorado Avalanche as well. And that is just life in the NHL and the way that you allocate your funding. So, when we talk about depth, like Brannstrom flipped the puck over the glass. After the good start, I was like, oh man, like that's tough. And again, a sort of high leverage point in the hockey game. Penalty killers stepped up there. Colorado had the first 2 power plays of the hockey game, although I didn't think much of JT's cross-check. That was a pretty soft call to put him in the box there late in the first period. But again, the Canucks come through. So, Quinn Hughes is going to play and play a lot. I thought Soucy was terrific, and Juleson, by extension on that pairing, they saw a fair bit of the McKinnon matchup. Soucy played a season high in ice time. 6 of the 8 minutes. Shorthanded. He was out there on the ice, so he was a huge contributor on the penalty kill, and that really has been a nice storyline here over the last 10 games or so. Since Hronek went down, they needed some others to step up, and Carson Soucy has really turned his game 180 degrees here from where he was. He was a talking point almost every night after games early in the season for the wrong reasons. He has this thing going in the right direction. He's got some positive momentum individually, and they're leaning on him. 23 and a half minutes of ice time for Carson Soucy, and he was up to the challenge. So,
address the other part of that pairing, though. Is Noah Juleson now an every night National Hockey League player? Does he stay out of trouble enough that he's just going to be there?
I think there's 2 conversations there. Every night NHLer, maybe top 4 defenseman on a good National Hockey League.
No, but I'm saying when Hronek comes back, Hronek comes back, is their right side solved when Hronek comes back?
No, Blake.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Oh, Blake.
They like Juleson's buy-in and the fearlessness on the penalty kill and shot blocking, but the game is still played primarily at 5-on-5, and you do have to be able to move the puck and win your battles, and he's limited, but he wasn't.
The reason I say that, Matt, is a left shot defenseman's easier to find.
I understand. I understand that. As we've discussed many, many times, he was a sneaky, more often than not guy last year. He basically played 2/3 of the season, 54 games last year for Noah Juleson filling in, and that is perfectly cast. If he is your third pair right side defenseman or your first defenseman off the bench for anybody right side, then you're fine. But
well, when healthy, that's what he is. So do you just improve on the left side and replace Brand? Like who's more? No. Who do you need to replace more in the final pairing when healthy, Brannstrom or Juleson? I guess that's the question.
And for me, it's the right side.
Yeah, there's always going to be the premium on the right side. And I think, too, we have to be careful here. Like, Tyler Myers isn't getting any younger. And he has stepped in and filled admirably with Quinn Hughes, and I think has held up his end of the bargain. But we're only 30 games in. There's still a lot of ground to travel this season. He turns 35 in the back half of the season, and then obviously into the playoffs as well. So I don't think anything changes in terms of what this hockey club needs, what this hockey club is looking for, the aggression of the front office. On nights like last night, hey, credit to both Carson Soucy and Noah Juleson stepping up and giving them a solid performance. But, consistently, they're probably playing with a little bit of fire here. Let's see what this team looks like out on the road when they can't dictate the matchups. And again, a tired team going into Vegas on Thursday. How do they handle what the Vegas Golden Knights can throw at them? So there are still questions, lots of questions around this group. But for a night at the very least, as it was on Thursday, there's a credible performance there that makes you think, like, if they can just eliminate the absolute stinkers, then maybe they can get a little traction here moving in the right direction.
Okay. Tocchet's press availability. It was unusual. He took 3 questions. He had the game sheet there and went down the list in terms of...
That guy was good. That guy tried hard.
As we know, Coach loves talking hockey. He basks in those scenarios post-game after a win where he's able to talk. What do you think is behind such an abbreviated press availability from Tocchet?
And he announced it. I'm going to be short today.
Yeah, and look, we were on RInkWide live after the game, so wasn't in the room, don't fully know the vibe, but my initial sense was he went pretty hard at the players on Saturday and then doubled down on Sunday after practice. At a time when there are trade rumors swirling, there are questions about internal chemistry and the kumbaya nature of this hockey club, it sort of felt like somebody might have from above said, hey, Rick, just tone it down a touch. Like, you don't need to be stirring this up anymore than is already happening. So you're right, because he's a guy that'll stand in there and answer questions for days and seems to enjoy it. I mean, he's a hockey guy and he likes talking about hockey, and there aren't enough of them, quite frankly, in and around the rink on a daily basis. A lot of the players used to, and you guys remember those days where players would just sit in their stall and chat. We don't see that very much anymore, but boy, this coach, he's a talker. And so, yeah, I mean, it caught me off guard a little bit. And I saw some people on Twitter making it sound like he had stormed off the podium and that he was angry. Watching it, I didn't get that sense. I just wondered if he had been asked or it was suggested to him just to dial it back a notch or two, especially after a really solid team performance. Like, I don't think he was going to go after anybody the way that he did against Boston, but still, I mean, it was sort of there was a stark contrast there to his tone, his demeanor, and just the fact that, he announced it beforehand. This is going to be short, and he was a man of his word. So it was strange.
The conversation from the weekend, and normally we have you on Mondays, but we wanted to go post-game day here. Elias and JT, Jeff, do you think this is a situation that can coexist long-term? And if push comes to shove, who do you think this management group and coaching staff would roll with?
I think it's pretty clear from what he has said, what he hasn't said, that there is still a rift at some level between the coach and Elias Pettersson. Going back to the playoffs, the playoff performance. Last week when he banged on the podium and said, Petey, that's all you guys want to talk about. And then the other night where he didn't name names, but I think it's pretty clear after a subpar performance about the emotional engagement that, without a doubt, that Pettersson was one of the 4 or 5. There are others, and nobody was good enough on Saturday. But then, I found Sunday curious as well, where he doubles down and points to the Edmonton Oilers, and boy, they've got guys at the top of their lineup that can win hockey games. Like, what's he saying without saying there? So I'm with you, Matt, that even though the points weren't there, that it was a solid performance from Elias Pettersson, and that if he does do those types of things, there'll be some tangible takeaways on the score sheet. But look, JT Miller is cut from the same cloth as Rick Tocchet. I think the coach sees that. The coach has certainly taken a shine to JT Miller for the most part. Now, everybody's got their limits, and we think that there has been some moments along the way where maybe they've butted heads. But I think if it was the coach and he had to pick one of those two guys, he's probably siding with JT Miller, just for play style and sort of all the intangibles there. Management may have a different idea and a different take. They were the ones that committed to Elias Pettersson long-term 6 months ago. So it's complicated, but for the people that say, hey, you media guys, this is all media-driven, everything else, look, I've been in that locker room for 25 years. I'm on with you guys twice a week. We've been doing this for, 15 years together as a group. I don't think I've ever come on here and said, there is a vibe. There's a weird vibe in and around that group right now. There is. It's undeniable. And this isn't a figment of my imagination. I don't say it lightly, that you can feel there is just... So,
the only thing I can think of that compares to it, Jeff, and you go back this far, I believe. I think you were in the room. The Messier years, it was weird in there. Win or loss, it was weird, and that's the only thing that ever since then, being in the room, it felt like a team, but it didn't at that time, and maybe that's what you're feeling again here.
Yeah, and part of it too, guys, is I think from the outside, there's this sense that hey, when the media goes into the room, every guy's sitting in his stall and they're all cutting up. And there was a time when that was you go into the room now and you have to ask for players to be brought out from the back and the players' lounge.
Yes.
So it's hard to truly get a sense of the relationships and the dynamics in that locker room because I just don't see a lot of interplay because I don't see many players other than the ones that are brought out to the front of the room. So all I can say, though, is just, again, being at the rink on a daily basis, and I go back to this idea that the record is incredible. How they've achieved it, there's just a lot of things that don't necessarily add up or make sense for this Vancouver Canuck Hockey Club, and I do wonder if they can all just get on the same page here and agree that, hey, maybe they're not all best buddies, but in the best interest of this hockey club, that they have to find a way to be aligned. And how much have we heard about management talking about alignment from the top down and all that kind of stuff? I guess that's Rick Tocchet's job right now, is to see if he can get everybody in a row here and playing for the greater good. And nights like last night, yeah, there's some hope there. But long term, I just don't know, Matt. I don't know ultimately how this is going to play out, but it just feels like it might be an untenable situation ultimately in the long run.
And the thing that Rutherford and Alvin, in conjunction with Tocchet, have to decide is if it's untenable long term, when do you act? Mm-hmm. Do you act before this trade deadline? Do you let it go to the summer and see what you've done in the playoffs or haven't done in the playoffs? But of course, Elias has his trade protection that kicks in with the new league year in July. So you basically have to make a decision here between, and the decision can be no decision. The decision can be, we're just going to carry forward with these two guys. And if it gets worse from here, well, then we have to have a hard conversation and make a trade from a non-leverage position, right? Because they would both have trade protection, and then you've got to work with them. But that is a tricky decision, and that's one I'm glad is not at my pay grade.
No, and I know you guys discussed it yesterday. I mean, obviously it was a front burner issue, and this whole Pettersson trade situation, it doesn't come out of nowhere. There is smoke. There's no question. He hasn't played consistently well enough all season long, given his pay grade. The things that I just mentioned about the coach here, the reporting from, consider the source, Elliot Friedman, he knows things, he's hearing things. So all of that makes me think that at the very least, there have been conversations. But I also think if you're Jim Rutherford, if it gets out somehow, some way that, Pettersson's name is there and you've had some talks with the Buffalo Sabres, how many other teams are all of a sudden jumping on the phone to call the Canucks to make, the FOMO, I would think. Players like Elias Pettersson don't hit the market very often. You are drumming up business at the very least from around the National Hockey League to see what others think, what others might be willing to pony up. So some of this might be intel gathering. And you're right, there's various stages here. There's a roster freeze coming in the next couple of days. I'm not anticipating any sort of massive move and shakeup before the break. But you're right, the trade deadline. And then beyond that, the playoffs. And we know that the playoffs did not go particularly well for Elias Pettersson. would they give him another run in the postseason here? If it doesn't go well, does that not reinforce some of the concerns that Rick Tocchet and others in the organization would have about, ultimately, can you win? Can this guy get you to the level necessary? So I just get the sense that a lot of this chatter isn't going to go away anytime soon. And ultimately, we'll see how it all plays out. But in the here and now, I think Petey's got to be a pro through it all, and he has been. There is no question there's room to elevate the consistency in his game. And certainly at the end of the day, there has to be more of a bottom line. He's being paid to be a superstar and a game breaker 30 games in. I'm not sure that there's been a night where I've left the rink and thought, hands down, he has been the best player. He's been in the conversation. He's been a star. He's had a couple of nights where he's put points on the board, but 30 games in, and I'm not sure that there's been a night where I thought, without question, Elias Pettersson, best player on the ice.
It reminds me of how many times two other guys in the NHL have been traded. Nick Ehlers and Willie Nylander have been traded 1,000 times in the National Hockey League. Actually, no, they haven't been traded at all. And I think Winnipeg and Toronto were both probably very happy that they sat on their hands and didn't trade either of those guys. So maybe that's an education on what the Canucks will ultimately do with the Vancouver or with Elias Pettersson. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think two guys, and it's never in a vacuum.
Ehlers UFA to be, by the way, could be traded by the deadline, but nevertheless.
For a different reason.
Nevertheless.
Not
if
for
it is about winning
or...
a cup, and we know where Jim Rutherford is in his career, and he said he wants to win a cup here in Vancouver. Quinn Hughes, a couple more years at one of the bargain contracts in the National Hockey League. Like, this isn't necessarily about the back end of the long-term contract for Elias Pettersson. It's in the here and now. And if they just don't feel that he is the right fit and the piece to get them where they need to go, for that reason, I could see the Canucks. Yep. And again, I'm not coming on here saying they're going to do this or they should do this, but I could see if they felt that you're just not going to win in the Stanley Cup with this guy, getting pieces in that address the other areas of concern for the Vancouver Canucks, certainly moving apart like that. You may not win the trade, but in the short term, you might be able to get the pieces you need to get your team where
that might be.
And Jeff, I have been struck by the absolute defeatism of some Canucks fans who think if you have to make an Elias Pettersson trade, that somehow you automatically lose that trade. I recognize the old adage in the NHL about whoever gets the best player in the deal wins the deal, but that was pre-salary cap. Salary cap totally changes the equation. Like, if the world comes where you have to trade Elias Pettersson and you get a second-line center, a top-four defenseman, and a third helpful piece in the construction of a team in the salary cap, that could absolutely be a winning deal for the Vancouver Canucks. Other teams have made deals where they have sent out the best player and emerged the better for it because of the pieces they were able to get in return. And, this team, with the way that they have traded and with a pro scouting staff that has been sublime, let's face it, we just talked about Kiefer Sherwood and his exploits, I would trust these guys to make a really good deal on either Pettersson, less so Miller because he's got the protection, so you're somewhat handcuffed, but I would trust these guys to make a really good deal if they needed to on Petey.
We'll see.
And I just thought, guys, I like a good storyline as much as the next guy. On the day where all of this is going on, and then wouldn't you know it, the Buffalo Sabres are the top team listed on along Scouts Row at Canucks in Colorado.
Oh my gosh!
Now, who doesn't want to see Makar and Hughes or McKinnon, right? There was lots of reasons, and every game is scouted. But the Buffalo Sabres aren't always in Vancouver. There are a lot of teams that have scouts based here, and I did think that was notable. And I also like the fact I think there were 11 teams that were on the list. Sabres were number one. On the seating chart there. So
maybe it was alphabetical, Jeff. Maybe Anaheim probably wasn't there.
By the way, guys, the New York Rangers melting down again today with comments from Capo Caco.
They want Drury fired. Apparently the room now just looks
it's a disaster. There's more than one team right now that is really wringing their hands. So
the Vancouver Canucks, at least we're not the Rangers.
At least we're not the Rangers.
And pro scouting, Patrick Alvin. What are we looking for this summer, gentlemen? Well, we're looking for good hockey players, but they need to have a chantable name.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. The syllables
Two
have
syllables
to work
first
out.
and last. Mandatory.
Thanks, Jeff.
Capo Caco.
All right, guys, we'll catch up after the road trip here.